My biological father? I didn't think about him. I hadn't heard from him since my mom took me. He didn't care about me. And as far as I was concerned, he was in the past, and I had moved on. That all changed one day when he showed up at my hospital. The moment I saw him, everything froze. I hadn't seen him in over 20 years, but there he was, lying on a stretcher, bloodied and bruised from a road accident. He looked fragile and old. My first instinct was to turn away, to pretend I didn't know him. But I couldn't. Not this time. One of the nurses came over.
Dr. James, the patient has suffered multiple fractures and he needs surgery immediately.
Could I really save and forgive the man who had destroyed my life? The man who gave my mother the disease that eventually killed her? No way. He deserved to be punished. I ordered the team to prepare him for surgery. The procedure went smoothly. I did my job, but made sure it wasn't complete. I did it in a way that sooner or later, his limbs would give up. I guess, to anyone looking from the outside, my childhood seemed perfect. My parents were well off, successful in every sense that society measures success. My dad owned several businesses, and my mom was some kind of socialite, constantly hosting parties and attending galas. People would stop me at school, admiring how lucky I was to be born into such a prestigious family. What they didn't know was that my life was a far cry from what you'd expect. Sure, I lived in a big house, filled with expensive furniture and the latest toys. But the house always felt empty. There was no warmth in it. Just me, alone, with a rotating cast of nannies and staff who weren't allowed to get too close. The truth is, I barely knew my parents. They were always too busy for me, always too distracted by their own lives to be parents. I still remember sitting by the window, waiting for them to come home. They would promise they'd be back by dinner time, but night after night, I ended up eating alone at the big dining table. The silence was suffocating. My father would occasionally pop his head in just to say goodnight before he rushed out for another meeting or another trip, and my mom would send a gift or two, as if a toy could make up for her absence. I wanted nothing more than just to sit with them, even for 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes never came. It didn't take long for me to realize that my parents' relationship was falling apart. I was just a kid, but even I could see the cracks. They fought constantly. When they were home, the house wasn't silent anymore. It was filled with shouting. I remember hiding in my room, trying to block out the sound of their arguments. They would argue about money, about business deals that went wrong, but more often, they fought about infidelity. They always accused each other of cheating. Once, I overheard my mother talking to a friend on the phone.
I'm not staying in this marriage for him.
I knew she wasn't talking about my father. She was talking about me. I was only 7 years old, but the weight of those words crushed me. I couldn't understand why they didn't love me enough to stay or even try. When I turned 8, things got worse. The arguments turned into long stretches where they would just disappear, leaving me behind without a word. Eventually, the staff started to disappear too. There were days when I wouldn't see a single adult in the house. I felt like I was living in some forgotten corner of the world, abandoned by the very people who were supposed to protect me. One night, it all came to a head. I was trying to fall asleep when I heard the loud crash of something breaking downstairs. I rushed out of my room and found my mom in the kitchen, throwing plates at my dad. The ground was littered with broken glass, and my father just stood there, watching her with pure anger. He didn't even flinch when a plate shattered inches away from him.
I'm divorcing you. I'm not doing this with you anymore. You stupid, cheating man.
I'm done with you too. Fine. Let's get that divorce you want so badly. That was it. No explanation. Just those words. My mom packed her bags and mine, then took me with her. I didn't know where she took me to, but I knew it was very far away. She kept apologizing to me every day for being a bad mother. Then one day, I overheard her again on the phone with her friend.
That bastard gave me HIV. I'm gonna die soon. I can't believe he hasn't even called once to check up on his son. What will I do with my life?
I cried myself to sleep that night. My mom had HIV, and my dad didn't even care about me anymore. I had hoped so much that my mom wouldn't die, but she found out about the HIV too late, and apparently it had already done a lot of damage. Eventually, she did pass away, just a few months after that call. She died in her room. I was devastated because, in those few months, she had truly changed toward me. She was good to me and never made me feel the absence of my dad. Her best friend was the one who buried her. But because she couldn't shoulder my responsibility by taking me in, I was sent to an adoption center. There, I shared a room with 3 other boys, all older than me, and they didn't hesitate to remind me that I was the new kid. We fought often, over beds, food, anything we could find to fight about. I was angry at the world, at my dad, at myself. I hated being there, and I hated that no one wanted me. But things started to change slowly. The staff at the agency were kind, and they tried their best to make the place feel like a home. One day, a couple came to the agency. They were different from the others who visited. They didn't rush through the process like most parents did. They spent time with all of us, talked to us like we were people, not just names on a list. When they met me, I could feel something was different. They asked me questions no one had ever bothered to ask before. They wanted to know about me, what I liked, what I was afraid of, what I wanted for my future. They visited a few more times after that, each time spending more and more time with me. Eventually, they told me they wanted to adopt me. I was excited. Moving in with them was like stepping into a whole new world. Their house was bigger and fancier than the one I grew up in, but it was a real home. They had 2 other children, both older than me, and they welcomed me like a little brother. I couldn't believe it. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. My adoptive parents were everything my biological parents weren't. They cared about me. They encouraged me to do well in school, helped me with my homework, and celebrated my achievements, no matter how small. And I wanted to repay them for everything they had done for me. I worked hard in school and made sure I got the best grades I could. They never pressured me, but I didn't want to let them down. I wanted to show them that I was worth the love they had given me. They saw me through college, making sure I never lacked anything. And when I graduated with honors, they were there, cheering for me. I became a doctor, just like I had always dreamed. My adoptive parents gifted me a fully equipped hospital to officially begin my career as a doctor. I couldn't be happier. Their children helped me in employing qualified people, because both of them were in that field. Life was good. I had a successful career, a loving family, and friends who cared about me. My biological father? I didn't think about him. I hadn't heard from him since my mom took me. He didn't care about me. And as far as I was concerned, he was in the past, and I had moved on. That all changed one day when he showed up at my hospital. The moment I saw him, everything froze. I hadn't seen him in over 20 years, but there he was, lying on a stretcher, bloodied and bruised from a road accident. He looked fragile and old. My first instinct was to turn away, to pretend I didn't know him. But I couldn't. Not this time. One of the nurses came over.
Dr. James, the patient has suffered multiple fractures and he needs surgery immediately.
Could I really save and forgive the man who had destroyed my life? The man who gave my mother the disease that eventually killed her? No way. He deserved to be punished. I ordered the team to prepare him for surgery. The procedure went smoothly. I did my job, but made sure it wasn't complete. I did it in a way that sooner or later, his limbs would give up. One of his coworkers was in charge of handling his bills. Of course, from my dad's pocket. I learned that he was now working under someone. His businesses had crumbled, but that didn't stop me from charging him more than I usually did. Every hour he spent on the bed, he was charged 3 times the usual amount for it. When he woke up a few days later, he requested to speak to me. Of course I agreed. We had a lot to talk about. Son, I can't believe this. You're a doctor now? Firstly, don't call me your son. You lost the right to do so years ago. Secondly, yes, I'm a doctor now. Thanks to my adoptive parents, the ones who cared about me when you didn't. He bowed his head in shame. I know I made mistakes, James. A lot of them. Mistakes? You didn't just make mistakes. You ruined my life. You gave Mom HIV, and she died because of you. You abandoned me. You never once tried to reach out after she took me. Mom died because of you. You didn't even bother to check on us. You didn't care. I was wrong, James. I don't have any excuse. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. Forgive me, please. You think saying sorry will fix anything? You're so selfish. You think you're worth my forgiveness? No. You're so evil. I wasn't going to forgive him. Not after everything he'd done. Before I left his ward, he shamelessly asked if I could charge him less, as he was already going broke. I know we're not on good terms, but could you consider me, please? I'm your father. You should even make my treatments free. But if you don't want to, please reduce the price. I should consider you? You didn't have any consideration when you abandoned me. You'll pay every cent, or I'll make sure you're in debt for the rest of your life. He still had to spend 2 more weeks at the hospital, but I didn't care. My aim was to make him go broke. I didn't stop there. His punishment wasn't over. I noticed that his coworker had a loud mouth, so I used him for my revenge. I pretended to break down in front of him when he came to tell me he'd paid the bills for the day. He asked what the matter was, and I told him his colleague was my father, who'd given my mom HIV and abandoned us. The man was shocked and comforted me. I can't believe he did something so cruel. He always told us he didn't have a family. I was even more infuriated hearing that he'd denied my mom and I to people he knew. It broke my heart even more. The man stopped coming to the hospital, and my dad had to be doing the payments himself. 1 week later, my dad called me again. I've been fired from the company, James. I'm going broke, and I'm not even getting any better. Help me, please. I'm going to be penniless if you don't help me. I refused. In fact, I made him buy an expensive wheelchair. The day he couldn't pay his bills, I asked him to leave my hospital. His wounds were nearly healed, but he couldn't walk. I asked one of my nurses to wheel him out of the hospital. I finally felt completely fulfilled. He no longer had anyone by his side, and he didn't have a job either because the company had fired him for lying on his medical record. He would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair, relying on the little savings he had left. He was eventually kicked out of his house because he couldn't afford his mortgage. Thanks for watching.